Okay. So, welcome to the Manchester SEO podcast. Today we have Elissa Dobson with us, founder of Menopause Mission.
No?
No?
Mission Menopause.
Mission Menopause.
Yeah.
Okay, I got that wrong, but welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Tell us about yourself.
Okay, so, my name's Elissa Dobson.
Yeah.
I am co-founder of Mission Menopause, and that came about. I've spent 20 years in the healthcare industry. I was actually a non-clinical operating theatre manager for 7 years. So,
Oh, wow.
Yep, in charge of operating theatres and endoscopies and things like that. So I worked in healthcare for a long time. Worked with a lot of female staff, a lot of consultants. But about 6 years ago, I'd gone from a really confident person to somebody who was really questioning my ability to do my job. I was having anxiety bouts, and then there was a moment in a meeting that I was with people I'd worked with for 10 years, and I couldn't remember their names, and I was sat in this meeting thinking, why can't I remember their names? And so I wasn't present in the meeting. I was in my head sort of worrying about what was going on. And at the time I actually thought I had dementia. I thought I'd researched it. I thought
It's
I had
a huge worry, isn't it, if you can't remember?
massive, I thought I had early onset dementia. And at the time I was sort of early mid-40s. And I went through a process of, I spoke to my GP, they put me on antidepressants. I spoke to occupational health, they told me to manage my stress better. I spoke to my boss and they put me on a performance improvement plan because I wasn't performing in my job. And all of that led me to walking out of my career. And I still didn't have any answers, I didn't know what was going on. But I started piecing all these pieces of the jigsaw together and finally realised that this was all to do with my perimenopause. And even in the healthcare world, surrounded by nurses and doctors, we'd never talked about it. I'd had no real education. So that was a real light bulb moment for me, and I just thought, I don't want anyone else to experience what I had experienced. So I retrained, I became an executive menopause coach, I've done my NLP training, and then I met my business partner, Caroline, and we've come together and we now have Mission Menopause, and our main focus is to stop other individual women stepping away from their careers due to a lack of support, education and empathy. So yeah, that's what we do.
So you mentioned about memory issues at the time. Were you having any other symptoms? Or?
Oh, lots of symptoms. But actually, because I had no education, I didn't piece it all together. So I had absolute fatigue, bouts of fatigue. So at one point I was told by the GPs I probably had chronic fatigue syndrome. I had aching joints. I was told I probably had arthritis, early onset arthritis. Hair loss, I lost so much hair, like literally it was falling out. I've put weight on, all sorts of different things, you know. Yeah. And I've never had a hot flush in my life, so I didn't have the one typical symptom that, people talk about. And headaches, that's the other thing. I had such severe headaches that for some days I'd be sort of out cold for a couple of days. But all these things were being dealt with in isolation. Nothing was pulled together in one issue.
And anxiety is a lot. I've heard that's a huge part of it.
Massive. And I think that's the thing. When most people talk about menopause, they think about physical symptoms, they think about hot flushes, they might think about night sweats and things like that. What we now know is over the 40 plus symptoms, nearly half of them are either psychological or cognitive. So anxiety and depression and loss of confidence are all major issues and major symptoms. And for me, that anxiety was massive. At the time I was going through this, I was actually third in charge of a hospital. I was the operations director of a hospital. So I had a lot of responsibility. I had a lot of people relying on me. And when I was having bouts of brain fog and I couldn't remember what I was doing or the people's names I was dealing with, then obviously that would have a sudden wave of anxiety. And then I was realising I wasn't performing in my job. But I just knew something wasn't right. I just knew something wasn't right. So, yeah.
Do you think this is... I can imagine if you're in a high-powered position, and any position with responsibility comes with an element of being able to control pressure and stress and workload, and then you've probably got a young family or a getting older family, and there's lots going on, and then your body's not allowing you to deal with that properly. It must be really, really tough, really scary actually, I would have thought. So.
I think you're absolutely right, and 25% of working menopausal women now I know are considering leaving the workforce. 10% actually do leave the workforce, and at the time I didn't realise I'd become one of those statistics. But also we know 8% of women are avoiding promotion. So I sort of grow up in those years of thinking about having a female glass ceiling, where women weren't in the boardroom, they weren't being allowed to sort of move up the ladder. Now I sort of see that as a bit of a hormonal glass ceiling, where women are stepping away from their careers because of the lack of support and understanding. But I think you're right. That's the other thing. We're also in the generation where we're in the sandwich years. So for me personally, at the time I had teenage children, but my parents are also getting older. So I'm managing
all that as well.
All of that. So I'm in a very senior role. I've got people in the workplace reliant on me. I've got family members reliant on me. But when I was going to the healthcare professionals, because I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't have the words to take to them to say, I think this is what's wrong with me, I was being sent down every path there was. So whether it was chronic fatigue, whether it was headaches, whether it was arthritis, if I'd had the education in myself to put it all together, that journey with the healthcare professionals would have been easier, but also the journey with my personal relationships would have been better, because I can assure you, when the day I walked out of my career was also nearly the day I walked out of my marriage, because my husband of 20 plus years didn't understand what was going on. No. Who was this person that was doing this, So.
Well, yeah, I can imagine what that might have been like. So how did that then turn into the business?
It took a while. It was a journey of a bit of self-discovery and, as I say, building that awareness of recognising all the elements that I was going through. And then it was actually me talking to a coach. I was working with a coach at the time. And he was a guy, and he just said, okay, tell me your story. And I said, well, I've done this, and this, and then throw menopause in there. And then that's what I started talking about. And I was like, I wish I'd known then what I now know, because I'd started putting the information together. And it was that led me to think, okay, how can I make a difference. You know, I don't want to be continuing this silence of not talking about it. And as I say, take me back into that healthcare world. We didn't talk about it,
No.
you know. And I look back at how, as a manager, I wasn't able to support my staff who clearly on reflection were going through that menopausal journey as well, but I didn't recognise it. So I was like, how do I change that narrative? So that's what led me to, I, completely re-educated myself and very focused on the workplace so that we help educate not just the females in the workplace, but everyone in the workplace, because everyone is going to be affected by menopause. So it's about being able to bring in the conversation, bring in safe spaces to have that conversation, and understand that this isn't something that, you know, should be kept silent. It shouldn't be something that is a joke. You know, 51% of the population are female. All women are going to go through a menopausal journey. Some will sail through and have no symptoms at all, and that is wonderful. But some will have debilitating symptoms, and then, you know, roughly 50% of the women will have a sort of mixture. And that journey can last. So on average, everything's averages with menopause. On average, in the UK, menopause, the day of menopause is 51. So women of 51 will go through the day of menopause. But perimenopause is the time leading up to that day of menopause, and our hormones are starting to fluctuate. On average, that takes about 4 years. Personally, I think I'm in about year 8 and I'm still in perimenopause now, so it can take many, many years, and our symptoms change, our moods change, our needs change, and it's understanding that that is a journey, and every woman is going to be different, so there is no one size fits all.
No. It's another reason to be, you know, thankful to be a man, really. In some ways.
You have to live with it. Exactly.
Well, there is that. Obviously, say that with jest, but you know, just imagine it's you know, everyone around it. You know, like you say, it's not just your work, is it? It's your family and friends, and you know, from memory, you know, when you're a child and you're in your family, and you have the older part of the family, so the grandparents and aunties and uncles, and some people say, oh, you know, Auntie Margaret, whatever, is acting a bit funny these days, and you know, and it was just what you said, and there was no real conversation about why or understanding about why. With that, so with that in mind, you offer awareness training, do you, for around this topic?
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, the really frightening thing is, in the past, women were sent to asylums because of their menopause symptoms. You know, I have lots of conversations with individuals and people in workplaces saying, oh, why is there all this menopause noise now? And there's lots of reasons for that. One, people just didn't used to talk about it.
Exactly.
And if you think about how society has changed, you know, people didn't have social media. They were isolated in communities. So women might have spoken to their 3 or 4 neighbours that were close by, but that was about it. So things were done behind closed doors. They would never have spoken to probably the men in their life about it. If they were working probably part-time. They were working for much shorter periods because they were at home looking after the children. Now, fast forward in the year 2024, you know, women are working and living a lot longer. Our pension age is moving constantly forward.
It's a different conversation, though, isn't it? But yeah, agreed.
I'm not sure when we're ever meant to retire, but we're moving forward all that time. Women are working, as I say, more full time. They're running their own businesses. So we haven't got sort of that luxury of stepping away from some of these responsibilities as we're starting to go through this hormonal change. So there's a lot that goes on, and that's the reason why we're starting to we have to be talking about it. We have to change the narrative. But it's also recognising that this isn't just an age-related thing. So about 1 in 100 women under 40 will go through menopause before the age of 40. 1 in 1,000 under 30, 1 in 10,000 under 20. And, I speak to women who have gone through surgical or medical menopause in their mid-20s, and they're sort of locked out of this conversation, they feel. We have to include our trans and non-binary community, because anyone that was born with female reproductive organs will at some point go through a hormonal change for the menopause. So in the workplace, it's really important that we have this conversation with everybody. I liken it to the fact that 15 years ago we would not have naturally talked about mental health in the workplace. When I first started work, I'd never have gone to my boss going, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit anxious today," just wasn't the done thing. Now, thankfully, that is accepted and it's expected.
Sure.
We need to move that conversation with menopause and female hormonal health all the way through.
Yeah. I had a friend who she's on the senior leadership team, so on the board of quite a big company, and always very social. As a group, friends meet up, and in the recent years it's been, I'm really busy, I'm struggling to keep up with things, and so I can't come out, and there's certain red flags that are appearing for her and being able to cope with job and life and all that kind of stuff. If anyone listening is feeling that way, is there any advice that you can give them as a way to seek help?
Absolutely. It's, for me, one thing that we should never do is medicalise menopause. There is, HRT, hormonal replacement therapy, things like that make a massive difference, but it's not the be all and end all. I'm on HRT, it's changed my life, but it's a bit like taking a paracetamol, that is helping with certain symptoms, but the other symptoms are, I need to recognise them in myself. So with Mission Menopause, we work with organisations in terms of education, but we also coach women themselves. So we've developed our own sort of framework, which we call SENSE, which is stress, exercise, nutrition, sleep, and emotional well-being. So it's, yes, talk to the GP and we can help individuals prepare for those conversations, because, as I say, I wasn't prepared when I spoke to my GP. So it's how you have that conversation, how you get out of it what you need. But also, it's about looking at everything else holistically. It's, how are you managing stress? We can't walk away from stress. Stress is part of life, but it's how do you cope with stress? How do you manage it? What things can you switch on and off? For me, just learning to breathe through things. It sounds ridiculous because we breathe all the time, but actually when you consciously breathe, when something happens and you just, try and slow everything down, you're moving out of that reactive phase. So you're going from reactive to, a bit more of a conscious process. So you're back in control. exercise, you know, strength training is great. I used to do a lot of strength training. I hurt my shoulder, so I sort of went from everything to nothing. I stopped completely. And so now I have to work my way back into psychologically stepping back into that environment. What's great now is there's some amazing female gyms, you know, where, you know, you can find that sort of safe space, go and do the training or whatever, but just getting out for a walk, you know, getting some fresh air. Nutrition is absolutely key. You know, we aren't the same body we were in our teens. You know, we can't eat and drink the same way. So I find I avoid alcohol a lot now. It's just not worth the headache. I quite enjoy trying all the different tasting tonics and things like that, or fresh water. But it's just amending those sorts of, you know, nutritional things. Eating the rainbow, you know, eating fresh fruit and veg, and actually enjoying what you're eating as well. Sleep is absolutely key. I think people underestimate the power of sleep. It's managing your sleeping space, you know, making that if it's your bedroom, you know, dark and cool and quiet, and removing all those electronics, and actually having a process of slowing down before bed. You know, I try and tell people avoid your phone for at least half an hour before turning the light off. It's really hard, but I find having a journal, you know, sitting there and doing a couple of minutes of journaling or reading an actual physical book, just switching off from those electronics, because they're stimulating us all the time.
In a few weeks we've got a biohacker coming on, and in conversation with him he talks about how the white light from screens sets off the cortisol hormone, the stress hormone in your body.
Absolutely.
And that affects your sleep. And it's amazing if you don't look at anything and you keep things off before you go to sleep, what better night's sleep you have.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to do these days, because I'm the same. I'm so attached to technology and phone.
Yeah. But then I think you have to ask yourself, you know, who benefits from that last half an hour on the phone? You know, are you actually going to benefit more from getting that, you know, good night's sleep, or finishing off those last few emails, or scrolling on social media, or watching something on YouTube?
Sure.
It's showing, you know, trying to prioritize what you need. And for us, sleep is so key, and especially when somebody is struggling to sleep, and you know, that's been one of my things. So just trying to get to sleep is really difficult. So I have to train my brain, you know, to say it's okay to go to sleep, and it's okay if I wake up in the middle of the night. That's okay. I'm just gonna let myself go back to sleep. Not easy, but it takes work. So yeah, sleep, and then emotional well-being. And that emotional well-being for me is about the education, about understanding what's going on, but also about talking about it. You know, the worst thing that I feel is when somebody feels uncomfortable talking about what's going on in their own body. You know, how often we hide things because we might upset somebody else. Well, actually, the more you lock that down, the more you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping those people around you. So, you know, finding support groups, finding you know, networks, building networks in your own businesses. You know, it all benefits other people, and not necessarily just for the women either.
Well, yeah, it's an understanding of why someone is behaving in a certain way, which you might think is unusual because you've known them a long time, or I mean, when I was doing a little bit of research for today, the stress hormone cortisol was a big thing in perimenopause, and so the amount that is produced in the body can be 10 times and more than normal, which leads to anxiety. And half the problem is controlling all that. And like you say, it advises exercise and diet and breathing and good sleep and all those things, which is probably what we should all be doing anyway. But
I think in the workplace it can be that sort of hotbed of stresses and pressures, and somebody not wanting to show their vulnerability because they see vulnerability as weakness. But over time we're recognizing that vulnerability, somebody that is able to show vulnerability is actually so much more authentic, much more able to deliver. So that's why we work with managers and HR teams to educate them about what menopause is, about the legal implications, because although it's not a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, it is covered under age, sex and disability. There's brain fog for you. So it's understanding that, but it's also understanding how to have a sensitive conversation, how to approach that, how to continue that conversation, and working with the staff themselves to going back to what you can do yourself to help yourself, keeping a journal, keeping a symptom diary, recognizing what the triggers might be when your mood changes or your sleep hasn't been great. If you've been drinking coffee up until 7 o'clock at night, has that triggered that sleepless night, or has something stressful happened that you've not allowed, but has then triggered another symptom. So it's keeping that journal, recognizing what not just the symptoms are, but also what some of the triggers are as well, and then finding ways of supporting that. And a lot, it comes down to conversation, having a safe space to have a conversation, and sometimes the smallest changes can make the biggest difference, especially in the workplace. It might just mean moving your desk to near an open window. It might mean having more toilet breaks, changing uniform, simple things, but unless you had those conversations, they're not going to happen.
Do you have any examples from the work you've done? Obviously, you have to mention names or businesses or anything, but any success stories, anything that you're proud of from the business point of view?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's been really interesting. We've worked with NHS trusts all the way through to 5-star hotels and SMEs. We work with a range of organisations. One of the most heartwarming ones was we were working with a spa, a very large sort of gym and spa, and we were there for 3 days. The first day we were training the managers, the next day we were training the staff, and the next day we were training champions. And on the first day, talking to the managers, and this is quite a big site, and the staff were working in sort of some environments which were very hot because they were spas, they were walking into saunas and things like that. But they also recognised that obviously the staff weren't able to always access the staff toilets, so they might have to use the customer toilets. And we talked about having the facilities in those toilets for being able to get changed, or have period products and things like that. So we'd had this conversation on the first day. When we got there the second day for the next day's training, the managers had gone out and bought baskets, and in every bathroom, men and women throughout the whole spa, they had put what we class as menopause boxes in, and that included face wipes and fans and period products, I think they put some sweets in there. You know, they just tried to think about all the things that they could. And we've now been working with that organisation for nearly 2 years, and over the past 2 years, those menopause boxes have grown. They've developed. The clients who use the facilities are just blown away by it because they're actually utilising it as well. And it's such a small change, but it's made a huge difference because it means that the staff can know that they can access products anywhere. Because for somebody going through perimenopause, you know, heavy bleeding might be a problem, you know, during their monthly cycle. So having access to those sorts of things is just such an amazing change.
Release some of the stress of it all, because there's an awareness as well, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, in terms of, obviously this podcast was created for business owners. There's two sides to this question, really. So, I mean, you may have covered most of them. From a business point of view, how they can support their staff. So, I'm waffling. The question is, have you any advice for businesses how they can support the staff?
Yeah. So one of the best things that has come out in the past year or so is there's a new BSI guide. So it's the BSI Menstruation, Menstrual Health and Menopause in the Workplace Guide.
Okay.
It's a 44-page guide. It's very detailed. It talks about how even SMEs can support women and their hormonal health in the workplace. What we've done is we've broken that down, and you know what we can do is help an organisation work through and prioritise what they need to do. So we don't advocate that every organisation has to have, say, a menopause policy, because it might not fit, but you do need to review your policy, so your absence management policy, your sickness policy, things like that, with a view for how would that work with menopause or hormonal health. It's about ensuring that everyone from the top down is part of the conversation. So it might mean just having a general conversation, you know, how are we going to approach this? What do we need to do? And actually asking individuals what they need in some cases. And what we know is, I can't remember the statistics, but women over 50 are some of the fastest growing. They're setting up their own businesses. You know, they're being entrepreneurial. They're stepping away from corporate life. So, you know, female-led businesses are huge, but they still need that support. So maybe having a support network around them. But I think it is having conversation. It's having safe spaces where you can share what's going on, but also look at some of the simple things that people need. So as we've said, you know, in terms of business, it might mean being able to share the workload. Not all the time, you know, it might just mean that a couple of days a month, you know, it's like, I just need to step away from this for the minute. Or, you know, plan the workload so that you're not carrying all the stress for yourself. There's lots you can do, but it's being aware. And I think for me, if I step back sort of 6 years, it was not having awareness of what was going on was the most frightening thing. And actually that's what led to making quite big and drastic decisions, you know, walking out of quite a lucrative corporate career. And my business partner her journey was slightly different, but she was the HR director for a very large FTSE 250 company. And she actually felt like through her perimenopause journey, she just got too old, you know, and she wasn't coping, you know, because of her symptoms. now, we're both running a business, so it's not that we're too old, it's not that we're not capable. We just didn't have the understanding. We didn't have as I say, the words to put into it.
Relating it to other awareness training like cyber security awareness, giving training to staff for that reduces the number of successful attacks, because staff are aware of phishing emails and what they look like and how to identify them and knowing who to report it to.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's a similar thing for everyone, where no one really has to know, but if you're aware that perhaps this is going on, you can identify that. It takes a lot of pressure and stressor. Pressure and stressor?
That's a
stress
new word.
Yeah. I've not had enough coffee this morning, that's my problem. Well, perhaps too much, that might be the issue. That takes a lot of the pressure away, and you can then deal with it and move on. And I'm not sure what the point of that was, but awareness is key, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is key. And we work with what we've recognised is there's sort of two types of businesses. There's the sort of those businesses, say the retail, hospitality, professional services, that are actually struggling to attract and retain staff. So they're struggling to keep experienced staff in the workplace. And we know that if somebody's had 20 odd years of experience, if they walk out of the workforce or they reduce their hours, it's not easy to replace that experience. You might be able to replace bums on seats, but you're going to lose a lot of knowledge and experience. So for a lot of organisations, they're really struggling to retain the skills that they need in the workforce. So that's where, when we recognise that some of the small changes, the education, the awareness can keep those women in the workplace, the benefit isn't just for the individuals, it's for the organisation and it's for the economy as well. You flip that over to, let's say, the STEM sector, where there's not enough women in the STEM sector, so they're struggling to attract people to come into the sector. And that comes all the way from the schooling elements all the way through. And we're doing a lot of work with the STEM sector in terms of what can they do now to be that employer of choice for those future generations, because I never know what Gen X, Gen Y, what gen we're talking about, but the generations that are coming through are going to vote with their feet. They're looking for organisations who have got all these things in place, that they're looking at well-being holistically, and that they're putting that equal with all the other benefits and pay and everything else, because they recognise that work-life balance has to be both of those elements.
Some of the most experienced and brilliant people in the businesses that I've worked in over the years have been the women within the business, and especially in businesses that were very, very niche, to lose 20 years of experience and knowledge and contacts, clients within the business is huge, and it's quantifiable, so it makes sense really to support them with what's going on. So that's sounds like great advice for businesses. Would you have any advice for business owners about running a business?
Business owners for running a business. I think what I have learnt is you can't be great at everything. You find your network, find those people around you that you trust and that you can either work with or get support from, and stay in your lane. You know, that's something we've discovered is the minute that we try and do everything, we do nothing well. So we really want to stay in our lane, but you know, we've found ways of educating ourselves. So we've worked with like the local business hubs and things like that to gain education. We've also said no to things. I think sometimes that's the hardest thing. Being a new business owner, you sort of think you have to say yes to everything. And sometimes opportunities come along, but they don't feel quite right, but you still sort of feel like you should say yes. I think over time you start going, actually, you know, that's a great opportunity for someone else. And so no, you know. So I think stay in your lane. And for us, we always go back to our mission, you know, and our mission is, you know, we don't want other women to step away from their life or their career due to the effects of menopause. So with the right education, support and empathy, how can we help that happen? And so that's what we question ourselves with now. You know, every time we think about something, we're like, does that really fit with our mission?
Is the outcome what we want from doing this?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Moving forward, what do you think are going to be your challenges? And
I think what we've recognised, one of the biggest challenges is because we're in a really strange sort of in industry in a way. So there seems to be a lot of noise about menopause, and we get told that a lot. Oh, everyone's talking about menopause. The difference is there's a lot of noise, but what we want to do is give really good, supportive conversation, education and advice. So it's breaking down that noise to actually what is going to make a difference. So we're doing a lot of educating, you know, educating why we're doing it. And I think that until we understand what's happening in the political landscape, you know, who's taking a lead on some of these conversations, then as a business, we need to be agile to keep changing in terms of, you know, where the political landscape is taking us, what the business world is actually looking for. And actually what we know is the business world wants solutions to keep their staff in the workplace, you know, so that's what we're delivering.
I think obviously we met at a networking event. I heard your story. It related very closely to someone I know, and I thought, what a great idea to bring awareness to it in an adult, you know, way where people can keep their lives together, you know, essentially. Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with the mission.
Thank you very much. And yeah, what I'd always say is if anyone has any questions, just reach out. You know, I'm always here for a chat.
Yeah, well, if they wanted to reach out, how could they find you?
On LinkedIn, so Elissa Dobson or Mission Menopause on LinkedIn, or I'm on Facebook. Not very good on Instagram, have to say, but best email address is hello@missionmenopause.com.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done.
Perfect, spot on.